But good afternoon, everybody that's here. Thank you so much for coming to Prodo's Virtual Hub. As I said just before, this is the second of our series for 2021. Last time we discussed everything from reporting and closing the loop in HubSpot. If anybody can't hear me or can't see the screen, please just leave a comment in the chat for us and we'll try and get that sorted for you. But today, first of all, I'm Hugh. For anybody that's out there that I've not met before, I'm the lead digital strategist here at Prodo. So my job role is speaking to all different types of businesses, helping them build inbound strategies to help you reach your short, medium, or long-term goals. And today I'm joined by my colleague Sam Banks from our inbound technical team. Sam, do you want to say a quick hello to everybody?
Yep. Hey guys, thanks again for joining the virtual hug. Like Hugh said, I'm part of the inbound technical team over at Prodo. Formerly, pretty much responsible for the technical implementation of HubSpot and mapping that to your bespoke use case in terms of how your business runs or your internal processes and really just getting the most out of the system. Worked in HubSpot now for the best part of 6 years, so I'd like to say that I've got a good understanding of the system and how it works.
I can vouch for that, Sam. So if you have not attended one of our hugs before, the HubSpot user group is all around sharing a couple of topics each session, and that's to help you get the most out of your HubSpot investment. So today we're going to be showing you lead scoring. Firstly, I'm going to talk you through the theory behind lead scoring and a 5-step framework for yourselves to put in place. And then Sam is going to show you how you can actually build the lead scoring system inside the HubSpot platform. At the end, we're going to have an opportunity for questions and answers. But if you have any questions throughout, don't just wait. Drop them in the chat pane. I'm joined by Meg, who's on video as well today. She's our marketing manager. And she's going to be help answering any questions and putting some useful resources for you to take away from today. Do you want to say a quick hello, Meg? Cheers, Meg. So for anybody that doesn't know about Prodo ourselves, we've been about since 1998, and we've been a HubSpot partner for around 6 years now. We're a Diamond Solutions partner, and last year we were ranked 3rd out of over 4,000 inbound agency partners for the Customer First EMEA Award. That's based on our 5-star customer reviews, our customer retention length, and also our customer adoption. Within HubSpot, we offer a wide range of solutions. So that can be from building inbound strategies, onboarding onto the different hubs, integration work, or even development of a new site using the HubSpot CMS, which we're getting more and more of those projects on now, which is great. So I know we've already said hello to a few of our clients that are attending here today, but hello from you all. It'd be great if you wanted to say hi in the chat pane, share any of your stories or experience that you've had with Prodo so far. And as I alluded to before, we used to run these pretty much monthly, and we've been running them virtually for over a year now since the pandemic came in, and we've had some really great guests and topics. So I know Meg and Sam have been working really hard in getting our video hub up and running. So if you do want to catch up on some of our other webinars to help implement those strategies for yourselves, please just visit our video hub and catch up on some of those great learnings from closed loop reporting like last time, or even going to catching some whales with account-based marketing as well. I know at the end, you'll have a copy of this deck, so you'll be able to capture all this information, but the other areas that you can go to is prodo.com/hug. If you fill out a form, you'll get a copy of that. So on to today. So like I said, I'm going to talk you through the theory of lead scoring before handing over to Sam. So what's better to start than understanding what is lead scoring? Well, lead scoring uses your customer behavior to tell you which are your hottest leads to target first, which leads need a little bit more nurturing for marketing, and which leads you don't need to waste your time with. The scoring is based on the interest they show in your business, where they are in the buying cycle, and their actual fit for your business. So there's 3 core reasons why you should use a lead scoring system. Firstly, a more effective marketing campaigns. Lead scoring will allow you to identify the campaigns and channels that result in high quality leads. From then, you can tailor your marketing strategy to generate more qualified leads. The second reason why you should build a lead scoring system is sales and marketing alignment. The biggest contributor to a misalignment between sales and marketing is not having an effective lead scoring system. So when your organization has a distinct rule set in place for scoring leads, you can ensure that every lead you pass on to sales will be qualified. And that's going to strengthen the relationship between the two departments, facilitating better sales and marketing alignment. And the third reason to build a lead scoring system is an increase in revenue. So with lead scoring in place, the sales department, they can prioritize which leads to follow up with first. They can reach out to qualified leads in a timely manner, and that will impact your revenue significantly. But in addition to all these 3 points, lead scoring can really streamline, simplify, and improve so many processes within your organization. And the best part is it's really not that difficult to implement. And just to sort of put some facts to it, organizations that use a lead scoring system experience a 77% increase in lead generation ROI. So how do you go about setting up a lead scoring system? I'm going to show you this 5-stage framework to building this system. Before I get into buyer personas, lead scoring most likely looks different at every single company. There's no one size that fits all. Every company should have its own uniquely designed scoring system that aligns with your particular goals, your particular objectives, and your particular targets. But even with the individual nature of lead scoring, we have a framework that for you to follow that's going to really help you. And the first thing that you should be doing is creating buyer personas. So before you can even start scoring your leads, you must have a clear understanding of the characteristics that make a prospect an ideal fit for your products and services. And that's where a buyer persona comes in. They're a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer. Each buyer persona profile is made up of criteria gleaned from quantitative research, anecdotal observations, and existing customer data. And the more buyer personas you have, the more holistic your understanding of your customers will be. And as a result, the more precise your lead scoring efforts will be. So I know Meg will probably pop in the chat pane now, but we've got a really useful guide to how you can build a buyer persona within 15 minutes. So that should help you get you on your way to starting. But once you've created that buyer persona, the second part of your framework is to decide and determine which data points you need to score. So we know who our ideal buyer looks like. It's time to understand which attributes you'll assign a point value to. And lead scoring criteria can be broken into 2 different main categories: demographic information and behavioral information. Now, demographic information, that refers to characteristics that a lead possesses. So that's something like a location, their age, company size, industry, job title, and seniority. The behavioral criteria refers to the actions that a lead takes or how they interact with your company. So that could be the email opens that they have. It could be the amount of web page visits they have, all the way through to form submissions, content download, social media engagement, or like webinars today, webinar registration. So for example, at Prodo, if you capture data, if you capture data regarding industry from your prospects, think about which industries you most want to work with or that meet your buyer personas. They would potentially have a higher score than other industries. And one other thing to clarify here is that every business will have its own definition of sales readiness. So we can't tell you what criteria you should score, but hopefully the above examples should give you a good idea to start some brainstorming sessions. Thirdly, once we've done that, we then want to start to assign point values. Now, not all scoring criteria are created equal. So your goal here is to define which traits and actions eventually lead to a closed deal. So you need to assign numerical values to each data point accordingly. So if we look at an example, leads who subscribe to receive blog updates don't always convert to paying customers. Likewise, leads who downloaded a white paper tend to have a higher conversion rate. So blog subscribers would get scored 2 points, whereas those who downloaded white papers would get a significantly higher point because we know that they convert more from when they download a white paper rather than subscribing to blog updates. But the best thing that we can add value to here is, first of all, talk to your sales team. Sales reps interact directly with customers every single day. Therefore, they've got the insight into the factors that qualify a person to become a customer. And they might even have a deeper insight into buying indicators that you might not have incorporated into your buyer personas. And if you don't want to take any of your sales rep times, you can go and check out your CRM data. You've got all of this information at the heart of HubSpot with your CRM data. So you can start to look at the customers that you've closed and actually see what information that they went through in their buying cycle. Secondly, what we'd always advise you to do is actually talk to your customers as well. Your customers can tell you about their buying journey in a greater detail than your sales reps can. So speak to some of your top buyers, ask them what the early steps were they took before deciding to make a purchase. And as you speak to more and more customers, you should begin to see trends, and that will assist you with your lead scoring as well. And thirdly, examine your marketing analytics. So analyze the data relating to all your past marketing campaigns. Which ones have generated the most leads? Or more importantly, which campaigns generated the most customers? So if you find that a specific piece of content has a high conversion rate, then you might want to assign a higher points value in comparison to other areas. So if we move on to the fourth part of the framework, this is to determine the point threshold that makes a lead sales qualified. So once you assign each data point a score, your total all points are masked by a single lead, and that's their final lead score. That would be great if that was the end of lead scoring, but the tricky part is actually the next part. You've got to determine what range of scores represent sales readiness. So this is likely going to take some testing and analysis when you first implement lead scoring. So we always recommend implementing lead scores with no minimum value to start. Request that sales follow up with leads equally, no matter their score, for a predetermined test period. Then once that test period is complete, analyze sales, follow up, and lead score. See if you can identify a clear cutoff point where leads stop turning into customers. Once this number is then determined, sales and marketing, they must work together to develop the appropriate outreach processes for leads of certain scores. So, for example, if after careful analysis you realize most leads that have a score below 30 never turn into customers, you come up with an agreement that sales will follow up with all leads scored above 30, and those who fall beneath that threshold will be placed into a nurture program until they become ready to buy. And the final part of this 5-stage framework is lead scoring is fantastic, but it's possible to do it manually. You need to harness the power of automation to make sure that your lead scoring system will work. So scoring leads without the help of marketing automation is going to be time consuming, and it can lead to data inaccuracies and lead routing problems. And as a lead is nurtured through the sales funnel, their score is going to likely to change. So without automated processes, it's pretty impossible to keep up with a single lead's activity, not to mention thousands of other leads as well. Luckily, you should all be HubSpot users. You should all have the capabilities to utilize the automation tools within inside the system to handle that lead scoring process for you. All you have to do is enter your scoring criteria, and the automation tool will score leads as they come in and will update their scores as they change. And you'll be able to reap the rewards of lead scoring without devoting a ton of your time to it. And we have also created a lead scoring template, which is available for you all to download if you wanted to get on your way with this. Now, I've gone through the theory of lead scoring in about 10, 12 minutes, so I hope you've enjoyed listening to that. Obviously, if there's been any questions, I'll answer those in the chat pane. But just before I hand over to Sam, what we always like to do when we get to these HubSpot user groups is say, you know, we want to evaluate your HubSpot instance. We understand it's a huge investment from a business perspective. So if you do want us to take a look at how your HubSpot instance is working at the moment, if you want us to review your lead scoring, we can do that through this health check. So please feel free to request that at any time. But thank you very much for listening to me. I'm going to hand you over to Sam now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Hugh. I'll just
stop sharing if you like, Sam.
Yeah, please. Bro, so let me just Well, I imagine you can see my screen. I don't know if that's a yes or no.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So thanks, Hugh. Again, a really good summary on basically what is lead scoring, the fundamentals, and basically the educational side behind essentially what lead scoring is and why you need it. Essentially why I'm here today is, like I said earlier at the beginning of this hug, is I've been working at HubSpot for 6 years now. I've worked across agencies, I've worked across many different sectors in setting up lead scoring. And just to echo what Hugh was saying there is every business, every organization, whether it's 5 employees all the way up to 500, lead scoring is completely different because it's unique to you, it's unique to your processes, it's unique to your teams, and more so, it's unique to your business priorities and focuses. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to aim to have you come away from this hug session understanding the process and steps that I would take in terms of getting this up and running within your HubSpot portal so that you can start hitting the ground running from day one and ultimately miss all those mistakes that I may have made in my first couple of years when it came to setting it up. So, without further ado, the way I'm going to do this demonstration is I'm going to show you one slide. I'm going to keep it to one slide. I appreciate you've seen quite a few now. So the way I like to look at lead scoring, to recap what Hugh was saying there, is lead scoring is a tool. Yes, it's great. It helps give you visibility of your database. But lead scoring is much more than that. It's much more than just a tool. It's also a mindset. It's a mentality. Lead scoring can be split into what I like to call the 3 A's. The first of which is all about alignment. Lead scoring is so pivotal to set up, but ultimately you need to align with your sales function, your service function, your operational function of your business to understand what does our business currently need in this next quarter to drive immediate business gains. What does the 6 months like? What does the next 12 months look like? Having this clearly defined before you even start will allow you to hit the ground running to understand what sales needs, what marketing needs, what service needs, and ultimately what the business needs, allowing you to capitalize on immediate efficiency gains and to make sure you're basically getting value from the system. The second phase of which is all about adoption. Now, what good is a tool that you all agreed is a good idea to use, but no one's actually owning it in terms of basically where is the ownership, how are you going to maintain it going forward, and ultimately, outside of just setting lead scoring up in HubSpot, what meetings are you putting in place internally within your organization to ensure that the velocity and more so the mentality of lead scoring is constantly front of mind? How can you understand that the MQLs that you're necessarily passing across to sales are good quality? Likewise, if they're not good quality, how can your sales team feed back to your marketing team to really be proactive and also reactive with what you're currently doing in terms of your marketing and sales efforts? Last of which is all about accountability. So we've got the alignment, we understand what an MQL is. We've got the adoption, we know who's going to champion the system and champion those meetings. But ultimately, how are we going to actually maintain control over this? When are we going to hand it over to sales? What are the timescales? What are sales going to do once the marketing's past it? Likewise, what is the notice time or the lead time that sales need from marketing? And even it may even go to a customer level. To separate our customers from evangelists, what do we need to do in terms of following up to get that information, that explicit information that Hugh was touching on earlier, or likewise, the implicit data that we'll cover later on in this demonstration. So with that in mind, I just want you to keep your front of mind when I'm going through this demo and think about how that alignment, how that adoption, how that accountability translates to your immediate organizational processes. So with that said, Hugh did allude that we do have a template. I'm sure that Meg will send a copy out after this hug as a kind of resource to get started. The reason I'm showing this on screen for you today is it's so important to actually map this down on paper. Again, the first stage of getting lead scoring up and running from the ground in terms of getting that first steps in place is understanding and aligning what each stage of your buyer's journey is. So in terms of a subscriber, what's the explicit data that we need to collect? Is it just their email? Is it the first name, last name, and email? What is a subscriber to your marketing function? And likewise, move from left to right in terms of going from that subscriber to your evangelist to understand what the life cycle stages are within your business and your organization. Because ultimately, if you're going to report on what you're passing across, you need to know what that means. Likewise, what this template will also allow you to do is once you have defined the positive and the negative actions, you can then score based on the values. And having this mapped out allows you to, one, easily return to this every 3 to 6 months, 12 months, depending on how often you set these reviews up, to understand that your lead score is constantly evolving as your business focuses do too. Likewise, Q1 might be all about going after the manufacturing industry, so we may score that higher, as you can see on the actual file. Likewise, professional and regulated may not be an immediate business focus for you guys. I think what I'm trying to say from this is by having this documented, having this easily accessible and able to understand allows you to quickly access and change this tool when you're starting to see them efficiency gains as well. And that's all about the alignment. That's all about basically the alignment as well as the adoption as well. So once you've got that mapped out in terms of a document, you've got that written down, you've had the meetings with your team, what does that mean? How do I get that into HubSpot? Rest assured, HubSpot has a property. So within your settings of your HubSpot portal, you've got the aspect of properties. HubSpot score is another way of phrasing lead score. HubSpot score, like you were saying earlier, it alludes, it's basically a blank canvas in terms of it is literally just a numerical field that is assigned to contacts, and that's about it. And the reason that I've gone through that document, gone through the theory of it, is because that number is unique to your organization. There is no number that constitutes what actually an SQL is. That is bespoke based on your business focuses and what your internal team needs are. With that said, once you've mapped that out, accessing the HubSpot score actual property is very, very simple and very easy to do. You can split properties into positive scoring attributes as well as negative scoring attributes. Likewise, you can score on anything from company properties to activity in terms of page views to even actually demographic information such as the phone number. Having this tool work directly from your CRM means that the data your sales team or your executive team in terms of the data entry side that is putting into the system is being scored and allocated in real time. So as soon as I start specifying new information or progressively profiling my lead, ultimately, more scoring modifiers will be made. By having it in HubSpot as well and having it documented side by side using whether the spreadsheet or one that you may choose to create internally, you can also map this onto a negative standpoint as well. Likewise, we can actually go into the actual tool and score negatively based on common attributes such as if there's unsubscribed. If we've got a lead and we're trying to work out who's ready for sales, typically someone who's unsubscribed from our email isn't probably going to be the most receptive in terms of speaking to our sales team. Likewise, you can actually score on individual marketing subscriptions as well. And that can be just as simple as basically scrolling down and adding new criteria via the button there. Immediate focuses as well is you may have a careers page within your organization. Leads that you want to actually sell to theoretically wouldn't be going to your careers page on your website, allowing you to deprioritize them contacts coming into your CRM so they don't even come close to your sales team. Meaning that your sales team are actively working on the aligned criteria we've agreed as an overall business function as part of that flywheel methodology to actually drive business growth. Likewise, you can see here, I've only got a few examples in terms of this score set up. It's not uncommon to commonly revisit it. The biggest mistake that I see from organizations is people that set lead scoring up and forget about it. There's no momentum, there's no consistency, there's no alignment, and more importantly, it's there and just left there to decay. Ultimately, what value is that beyond the number? So make sure that you're constantly coming back to this tool and adding new criteria as your business displays a business need for it. As I was saying, adding a scoring property is very straightforward. You can simply score on contact, company, deal, activity, all the way down to line items, marketing emails, or even the individual subscriptions they're on. Depending on the size of your hub and depending on the products that you buy with HubSpot, you will have more access in terms of if you're on enterprise compared to starter. So you can start scoring on more tool requirements and tool functionality that's related to your business as it scales. So again, to fit with the actual model of HubSpot that you can grow as you scale, more importantly, you can also map your lead scoring to that as well. So again, just to demonstrate on screen how easy that is, let's say that I want to basically, I've just launched a Meet the Team page. But theoretically, anybody that's going to go on the Meet the Team, it might be that I actually want to score them a bit higher because they want to put the faces to the name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the positive attributes. I'm going to select an activity property. And I can score on basically meetings and tasks as well. But more importantly, what I can do is I can go down to page views and I can start doing Boolean criteria as well. So we can have contactors viewed at least one URL equal. So it's got to be this exact URL. Or likewise, you can create containing. So for example, if we've then got subpages off that, we can just use the containing function to capture all as well. So in this case, I'm just going to put / so www.example.com / meet the team. So if they exactly meet that, apply the filter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that a score of 25. The score that you give and the point value that you attribute to a feature or a rule like that is completely up to you. Typically, we recommend you have a score range between 0 and 100 because it's a big enough sample size and a big enough range to distinguish what a high score is from a low score to a medium score, etc. It's not uncommon to use 0 to 10 if you want to use points in terms of attributes like that. You've just got less leeway in terms of basically highlighting priorities from non-priorities. Likewise, we've just added the score in there. And once you've fully set up your lead scoring framework within the actual backend of HubSpot, you can then test it. You don't have to put it live instantly. You can save it and leave it to run. You can then test it based on a contact in your database in real time. So likewise, I can then go to my database. I can pull out a test contact. So I can select the contact from my CRM. I can press test. And as you can see, based on what I've just put into the scoring rubrics, it will actually give me a score in real time based on this contact from my database. So again, if you're looking to get internal approval, you're looking to get alignment or buy-in from your business, you can set up an alpha of what your lead scoring looks like and present this, similar to what I'm doing on the show right now. Likewise, this tells you basically where to start, and more insight, it gives you the insight between what the information in your CRM you commonly collect. A common question I get asked is, how do I know what to score on? I don't know what the common explicit data I'm going to get submitted via a form. That's fine. Put something as placeholder into HubSpot Score and run contacts through it based on what you want to achieve and test contacts before you even start building it. This will allow you to see that the likelihood that you're going to have this data in your CRM from the get-go. If not, it will inform a data collection strategy to understand basically how can we structure and standardize the data we're putting into our CRM, whether that's via manual entry or standardizing the forms we have on our website. Once you've set up lead scoring and you've assigned scores, that will be publicly accessible on the contact record. But the next question is, what can I do with that? Well, pretty much it's a blank canvas, as I've been saying for this entire demonstration. But you can use HubSpot Score now as a key KPI in terms of creating workflows, creating lists, filtering your database. Them thresholds that you set in terms of if they score between 25 and 50, for example, I may want to set them as an MQL. I may define in my initial template that when I do my lifecycle stage mapping, that the common score for an MQL, if they were to trigger all this, based on the points that we collect here, anyone between 25 and 50 is an MQL. So therefore, I'm going to create my workflow based around that threshold. So HubSpot Score is greater than or equal to 25. And then HubSpot Score is less than or equal to 50. What it's then going to do is my workflow is set them as an MQL. So again, we're automating the handoff process via a controlled and structured way. What we can then do is we can not stop the journey there. We can improve communication and efficiencies across your organization. We can send internal email notifications, which may go to your sales team, which you can set up via HubSpot Teams. Or you can specify individual users if you're a smaller sales team. Or if they've got an existing owner, so someone that's owned it right from the get-go, we can send a notification to that existing owner to say, congratulations, your contact is now an MQL. Please could the sales team pick this up and deem if it's sales qualified. Likewise, you can insert contact tokens. You can personalize this with CRM data, as you can see on the show. But what I'm really trying to get over here is always provide a next step. These automated emails are quickly ignored. So make sure that there's one, accountability, and two, there's an alignment as to what the next steps are. And you can see that I'm threading in what I said at the beginning of my demonstration in terms of everything I'm rolling out on HubSpot. So likewise, I put hello sales. We've generated a new marketing qualified lead for you to qualify. Here's a summary based on the information I've agreed we want to collect at the MQL stage. And then likewise, the email notification will contain a button to their contact record. So from their own inbox, they can click into it and profile. And if they agree, they can set the lifecycle stage as a sales qualified lead, essentially giving us that conversion rate from MQL to SQL, which is critical when it comes to business forecasting and ultimately setting up your campaigns. The other aspect that you can do with HubSpot Score is you can use HubSpot Score to create a workflow to create contacts into lifecycle stages. And then based on the lifecycle stage, we can then create lists. So we could create active lists based on the lifecycle stage is any of SQL. What this tells me is I can then create increased transparency over my database of 15,000 contacts, for example, to show me exactly the proportion of that database who is in SQL, meaning that the sales team won't get an email notification, but likewise, I've got a list, an active list, that means people will fall out of it if they move lifecycle stages to show me exactly what the hit list is in terms of what the proportion of my database is sales qualified. Likewise, if you've agreed in terms of that rejection rate that maybe the MQL are being rejected and sit in that MQL pot, you can then as a marketing function create a strategy to how can we get more data to get them into sales qualified? How can we re-engage them? All on the basis of this list. So you can use this list as a volume number to actually go forward and curate a strategy that is data-driven and at the central of your business growth. Last of which, before I conclude this demo, is you can then create really powerful reports based on the lifecycle stage that all started with HubSpot Score. So you can actually create year-on-year graphs based on the contacts you've generated, and you can split that out by your MQLs to understand how many MQLs you generated as a marketing function. And likewise, in terms of your marketing to sales handover, what your conversion rates are from each individual stage. Again, what's critical is, again, it's not just attributed, and the accountability is not just on the sales team, it's not just on the marketing team. It's on a consensus. And having visibility on it allows for cohesion and collaboration. So again, get into the habit of creating a dashboard in HubSpot that shows you this data in real time, that is dynamic, and use this as the pivotal point of your MQL to SQL handover meetings. Discuss the volume of leads you're bringing in on a weekly basis to allow you to stay at the front of your strategy and to align with what them year-on-year goals are. More importantly, you can then create actual contacts in terms of what marketing contacts do we have that are sales and what are sales accepted on a qualitative level as well. Again, making sure that entire meeting is driven by HubSpot and driven in a data-driven way as well. So again, to recap on where this all started, we all started just from this individual HubSpot score, but by a 3-stage process, which if we go back to the original slide in terms of what that looks like, comes back to alignment, adoption, and accountability. By incorporating them 3 core principles alongside HubSpot Score will allow you to grow your business in an aligned, an adopted, and an accountable way, meaning that your business growth is at the center of everything that you do. And that's my demo. So if you've got any questions, please do just put it in the chat and I'm happy to answer any questions from there. Hugh, I'll let you take back over.
Sam, that was great. Every time that I listen to something that you do, perfect. Just have so many more questions for you. So first thing I wanted to ask you, Sam, before I look at everybody else's questions is, we've recently gone through a lead scoring project with one of our clients, and we're going through it ourselves internally. Now, the negative attributed contacts, what would you do with them? Would you purge them? Because me, looking at it from a sales perspective, HubSpot is quite a big investment. If we're getting loads of Gmails that come through who are trying to sell into Prodo, for example, it's pointless them being in the system. So can we use lead scoring to basically cleanse that database?
So to go back to what I was saying in terms of what the negative attributes, now what's core to understand with lead scoring is that if someone's negatively scored, it's at a point in time. There's no, HubSpot score is dynamic. It allows for someone to come back, but ultimately it's at a point in time. So even though they may not be our sales qualified at that point in time, that's not telling me to purge the database. It's not telling me to delete the contacts if they're negatively scored. It's actually giving me more use case to talk to the marketing function. What can we be doing here? How can we be supporting the sales team? And more importantly, how can we get them the information that they need? So ultimately, don't purge your database. That data, a customer may not convert right now, but there's nothing to say they won't in 6 months' time. And that lead scoring framework is there to flag them up as they profile themselves, or your sales team help put information into the system. It's a collaborative effort.
Definitely. And I think the other question that I had for you, Sam, was a lot of the individuals that are listening in today, they might have had HubSpot for a couple of years and maybe never implemented a lead scoring system in place. So they'll have data that's been collected over the last 2-3 years potentially. So then if they all of a sudden implement a lead scoring system, that could massively impact in terms of 1 week they're going to get 20,000 MQLs, for example, or what would you do in that respect? Because I can see there's arguments on both sides. So just be keen to understand from a technical standpoint, what would you do?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to communicate that change. If you've got that kind of volume of data, it's important to make sure everybody's on the same page in terms of what the next step is and how to actually get that data. If we're discussing what lead scoring is and what the business goals are, ultimately everybody should be involved. Everyone should have some form of transparency on that change. But what's important is to communicate the change before it even happens. Let people know if you're going to implement a lead scoring system that basically there may be a spike in MQLs. There may be a spike in SQLs, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That actually gives me a new action point to actually nurture existing contacts than to attract new ones. Everybody knows it's much cheaper to nurture an existing contact in your database than it is to go out and attract a new one. I'm sure you can vouch for that in terms of flagging up hot leads. So again, the most important thing is lead scoring. There's no right and wrong, but it will give you the most accurate representation at that point in time to get started.
And I think that a really good point you made earlier, Sam, was getting someone to champion this internally. And one of the things that was going through my head is that in certain businesses, there could be loads of different users within the HubSpot platform that can create new properties, create custom properties, or even attribute lead scores, both positive and negative. In that case, what would you do? Would you recommend locking it down, HubSpot the permissions, so that only one person can add new properties and change around the lead scoring, or a select few? How would you go about that?
Yeah, so you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's critical in terms of if you've got a champion internally to champion the HubSpot side of things, or even if you've just got a CRM administrator, so someone that's managing your data, if you're handling an influx of large subsets of data. I think what's important is, one, you can set access by features, so you can turn features off at a role level if you're on enterprise. You can set access by a team level, if you're on pro. And you can set it by just a general user basis as well. So depending on how you structured your internal teams on HubSpot, you can actually limit or freely give access on each tool within your portal. Again, just to reiterate, the tool is one side of the conversation, but the most important thing is ensuring you've got them regular feedback sessions internally, whether that's your reps to your sales manager to tell what the quality's like, and then having that champion in terms of whether that is the sales manager to meet with the marketing manager and the operational manager to discuss, is this actually working?
Yeah, definitely. I know we've had some questions come through, but just while I get a hold of those from Meg, it'd be great to understand if anybody has implemented a lead scoring system that's listening today, or what their experience is in terms of, why you're here today. Is it because you're looking to implement a lead scoring system, or wanting to understand a little bit more, or yours isn't working, or it is working, just wanted some advice? So that'd be great to know. Meg, we had some questions that come through for Sam.
Yeah, so we had one come through ahead of the session. Thank you, Phil, for sending that on. He wanted to know whether or not, if you don't have a clear picture of existing contact habits, so you don't know what a customer does before they become a customer, where do you start with lead scoring?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a great question. So in terms of how I go about tackling that specific use case is earlier on screen when I showed the HubSpot tool on the show in terms of HubSpot score, you can test contacts through it. So in order as a starting point, before you even document it, put down what you ideally want to collect for what the sales team are looking to generate and run test contacts through it to see how many you trigger at that point in time. It might be that out of the 8 rules you've set up, you're only actually hitting one of them. And for me, that highlights 2 different possible scenarios. One of which is you're not collecting that data right now. The second of which is you may be collecting that data, but either contacts are not freely giving that because it's either too intrusive or it's not the right information you want to collect. Or likewise, your sales team aren't working in a consistent way to actually put data entry in the system. And I say in our sales team, anybody across the actual CRM who's putting data in on a regular basis. So again, get into the habit of actually 1, documenting it down either using a worksheet, or 2, actually using the tool to run test contacts through to see how many rules you're actively triggering right now in terms of the data you're collecting.
Hopefully that answers your question, Phil. I know there was a little bit of a subset to it as well, where it was kind of like, so if you've done that, then if you're basing it on landing on content, things like that, emails, then what do you do? Do you set thresholds that then qualify the contacts and trigger relevant workflows? And then kind of like as another question to that as well, then how would you know what the thresholds would even be once you've done that?
Yeah, so when you go through and you basically have picked all the data you're looking to collect and the points values for what values someone could provide, whether internal or external data, go and basically do the journey as a customer. So if you as a customer at your own organization, what would you freely give up information-wise? And commonly, for you speaking to your sales team, what are people freely actually giving as part of their own consent? It might be that I want to work in the hospitality industry, but actually the majority of our contacts are not specifying industry on our forms. 1, do we make that required? Or 2, do we basically look at another sector? So once you've established what you believe the common data journey is in terms of what people specify at each stage, add up the points, and then basically say if they hit between this point and this point in terms of a threshold, that constitutes a subscriber, that's a lead, that's an MQL, SQL opportunity customer evangelist. And that's basically what you saw on screen when the workflow enrollment was between HubSpot score of 25 and 50. And that was, for me, in this example, the MQL threshold.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Phil, I know you're on the chat, so let us know if you've got anything further to that. Earlier on, we had one from Terry Bonner, a little bit of a controversial one, but whether or not, what are our opinions in terms of the limitations of the platform at the moment, whether or not we know internally if there's any improvements upcoming in terms of the functionality. He did give an example, things like the fact that the scoring fields are limited to 100.
Yeah, exactly. So great question. Really informative as well. A point that I wish I would have covered when I had it on screen. So in terms of what that means, one of the exercises we're doing internally at Prodo that Hugh alluded to earlier in this presentation is we are actually doing this for ourselves. Our business has changed massively over the year. And the biggest challenge for us at the moment is because we work with 2 huge subsets of data is actually defining what a limit of 100 rules looks like. So that 100 rules encompasses both your positive and your negative actions in terms of basically getting that in. So really hone down on what the core attributes is. Commonly what I find is that when I work with organizations, the ones that are hitting closer to 100 are the ones that let lead scoring quickly scale and lose control, because there's so many different entry points, so many different ways to score themselves. They're actually just slipping through nets and the control isn't there. I think when speaking to HubSpot, it is something that's on their radar in terms of basically building that tool out based on the recent release of the Operations Hub as they look to improve collaboration across the entire business. So likewise, them features that are coming out to enable all those teams, lead score is a key part of that. HubSpot score is also a key part of that in terms of defining when the handoff point should happen. But in terms of what you said there, Terry, you've hit the nail on the head. The biggest actual challenge at the moment is you're limited to 100 rules. So again, just keep that in mind when you're documenting or planning a lead scoring framework.
Makes sense. Hope that answers your question, Terry. And if anyone's got other opinions, thoughts on the functionality, let us know. Matthew asked, how do you manage lead score over time? Which I think you've kind of touched on in bits and bobs, but if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, so what we like to do, a common rule, is align your lead scoring reviews in typically with what your reporting cycle is. So if you've got a quarterly reporting cycle, so you do a quarterly report. If you've got year-on-year goals, so you've got one big end-of-year report. Likewise, when you're looking at these dashboards, so again, get into the habit of using dashboards alongside lead scoring. If you're finding that you're not generating enough MQLs, that should be the first kind of nudge in terms of basically saying, should we review the criteria that we're asking for? Again, just if you have a month where you don't hit your target, that doesn't necessarily mean to completely overhaul lead scoring. But ultimately, if you're seeing a pattern and a correlation forming, that's when you start need to be asking questions. That's when you need to start booking in a workshop to get your sales team aligned and get their feedback. Ultimately, the most important question you can ask when it comes to reporting is, how do you feel this time frame has gone? And if everybody's in agreement, we're not generating enough leads, or the leads aren't good enough quality, that's a big indicator that it's lead scoring. So long answer there. The short answer is basically you define the timeframes that's relevant to your business, but typically tie this in with your reporting cycle internally.
Makes a lot of sense. Let me just scan through. There's been a few bits and bobs going on.
A couple through in the last couple of minutes now. I've got one here from Simon Sam saying, if some of your audiences or life cycle stages are significantly different, how would you approach this? Would you combine the scoring into the same HubSpot score property, or create a new score property, which he believes you can do in HubSpot Enterprise?
Yeah, so great question again in terms of data. Again, a common one for enterprises. So at the moment, we actually doing this, again, exercise internally at Prodo. We work with two very big and very different products and service use cases. At the moment, we've managed to combine it into a singular HubSpot score. Out of the box, HubSpot typically only has one global field that is linked to everything pretty much feature-wise. So I would recommend just using that in terms of the interim. What you could do is, instead of scoring based on values, is set up an overarching property to identify what audience they necessarily sit in. So for Prodo, as most people on this probably hug are aware, we've got a huge housing focus, and likewise we also have a non-housing focus where our products are slightly different. So we are scoring based on a top-level property to identify if a contact is housing or non-housing, and ultimately for us, that's the biggest scorer in terms of understanding how we score in terms of that framework. Ultimately, what that means is, if we want to go after housing for a particular quarter, we will score that necessarily higher, but it also saves us from having to create 10 different rules to get to the same outcome. So again, just think about how you can create either an overarching property to score that on, or likewise create automation to filter into that, to automate some of that process. It's quite a unique use case, so if you've got any other further questions on that one in particular, feel free to send that over and we can have a more detailed chat about that.
That's great, thanks, Sam. And we've just had, I think that sort of answered Phil's question as well. So Phil was asking, can you set up different scores for different customer types, which is sort of what you answered there, Sam, so that's great. Nice. And Christine has asked, if a score criteria is set, for example, a page click or email open, would the score keep totaling every time the action is taken? So I score a score of 1 to open an email, and the customer opens the email 6 times. Will they end up with a score of 6?
Okay, so this is another common use case. So unfortunately, at the moment, you've got to specify once you hit and trigger a rule, you've triggered it. There's no re-enrollment in terms of reactivating and keep triggering that, unfortunately, at the moment. If it's something that you want to do, you need to create separate rules for each time. So basically, marketing emails clicked is 1, give them a score of 1 point. Marketing emails clicked equals 2. Add another rule and then score them a point again. And keep doing that based on what the common actual pattern is. One of the biggest challenges at the moment is obviously the amount of rules you want to create for compound scoring, such as that, is it takes up what someone else alluded to in the chat in terms of that 100 rules rule from HubSpot. So just basically bear that in mind. What you can do though is you can set timeframes, so you can set rolling date ranges based on the scoring rules that you select. So if marketing emails clicked equals 1 in the last 30 days. So you may want to set up a rule like that, and that might be a slight workaround, but typically you'll need a rule for each one, unfortunately.
I hope that's answered your question there, Christine. I think that's all the questions that we've done. So just to sort of wrap up today's session, everybody, and everyone can get an extra 5 minutes back in their diary. We've got a number of resources that are available that Meg and Sam have created, from lead scoring and wider things. As you know, we talked about earlier, the video hub with all of our past HubSpot user group events. Please, make use of those. If you want to reach out and have a chat with myself or Sam at all, we're always on hand to help you, your HubSpot instance, or understand more about your whole digital strategy as well. So do feel pleased to reach out. So outside of that, we have, the HubSpot Academy is great for different places to understand more about lead scoring if you haven't got enough out of today. So you use the HubSpot Academy. We always advise you to. We regularly go through our certifications. Need to go through a couple more at the moment with the new Ops Hub, but I'm sure we'll get there soon, Sam.